Section 19 of Astounding Stories 16, April 1931. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by John Williamson. Astounding Stories 16, April 1931 by Various. The Lake of Light by Jack Williamson. Part 2. In a moment, the intensely brilliant ruby ray flashed off. The rocks in the circle where it had struck faded to a dull red, and then to blackness, still cracking and crumbling. To my intense relief, the monstrous crab lumbered on.
"That," Ray whispered, "is what got Major Meriden's airplane wing."
When we could hear its scraping progress no longer, we climbed up from behind our boulder and continued cautiously down the cavern, beside the rushing, luminous river. In half a mile we came to a bend. Rounding it, we gazed upon a remarkable sight. We looked into a huge cavity in the heart of the earth. A vast underground plain lay before us, with the black lava of the roof arching above it. It must have been miles across, though we had no way to measure it, and it stretched down into dim, hazy distance. Its level was hundreds of feet below us. At our feet, the glistening river of fire plunged down again in a magnificent flaming fall. Below, its luminous liquid was spread out in rivers and lakes and canals over all the vast plain. The channels ran through an amazing jungle. It was a forest of fungus, of mushroom things, with great fleshy stalks and spreading circular tops. But they were not the sickly white and yellow of ordinary mushrooms, but were of brilliant colors, bright green, flaming scarlet, gold, and purple blue. Huge, brilliant yellow stalks, fringed with crimson and black, lifted mauve tops 30 feet or more. It was a veritable forest of flame-bright fungus. In the center of this weirdly forested subterranean plain was a great lake, filled not with the flaming liquid, but with dark crystal water. And on the bottom of that lake, clearly visible from the elevation upon which we stood, was a city. A city below the water. The buildings were upright cylinders in groups of 2 or 3, of dozens, even hundreds. For miles the bottom of the great lake was covered with them. They were all of crystal azure blue, brilliant as cylinders turned from immense sapphires. They were vividly visible beneath the transparent water. Not one of them broke the surface. Through the clear black water we saw moving hundreds, thousands of the giant crabs. They crawled over the hard, pebbled bottom of the lake, or swam between the crystal cylinders of the city. They were huge as the one we had seen, with red shells, great ominous-looking stalked eyes, luminous green tentacular antennae, and knobbed claws on forelimbs.
"Looks as if we've run on something to write home about," Ray muttered in amazement.
"A whole city of them, a whole world. No wonder they could build that cone mountain for a lighting plant."
"When they got to knocking down airplanes with that heat ray," he speculated, "they were probably surprised to find that other animals had developed intelligence."
"Do you suppose those mushroom things are good to eat?"
"We can try and see, if the crabs don't get us first with a heat ray. I'm hungry enough to try anything."
Again we cautiously advanced. The river of light fell over a sheer precipice, but we found a metal ladder spiked to the rock. with rungs as inconveniently far apart as those in the shaft. It was 500 feet, I suppose, to the bottom. It took us many minutes to descend. At last we stepped off in a little rocky clearing. The forest of brilliant mushrooms rose about us, great, fleshy stalks of gold and graceful fringes of black and scarlet about them, with flattened heads of purple. We started eagerly across toward the fungoid forest. I had visions of tearing off great pieces of soft, golden flesh and filling my aching stomach with it. We were stopped by a sharp, poignantly eager human cry. A human being, a girl, darted from among the mushroom stalks and ran across to us. Sobbing out great incoherent cries, she dropped at Ray's feet, wrapped her arms about his knees and clung to him, while her slender body was racked with sobbing cries. My first impression was that she was very beautiful, and that impression I was never called upon to revise. About her lithe young body she had the merest scrap of some curious green fabric, simple in the warm air of the great cavern. Luxuriant brown hair fell loose about her white shoulders. She was not quite 20 years old, I supposed. Her body was superbly formed, with the graceful curves and the free, smooth movements of a wild thing. Ray stood motionless for a moment, thunderstruck as I was, while the sobbing girl clung to his knees. Then the astonishment on his face gave place to pity. "Poor kid," he murmured. He bent, took her tenderly by the shoulder, helped her to her feet. Her beauty burst upon us like a green light. Smoothly white, her skin was perfect. Wide blue eyes, now appealing, even piteous, looked from beneath a wealth of golden brown hair. White teeth, straight and even, flashed behind the natural crimson of her lips. She stood staring at Ray in a sort of enchantment of wonder. An eager light of incredible joy flamed in her amazing eyes. Red lips were parted in an unconscious smile of joy. She looked like the troubled princess in the fairy tale, when the prince of her dreams appeared in the flesh. "God, but you're beautiful." Ray's words slipped out as if he were hardly conscious of them. He flushed quickly, stepped back a little. The girl's lips opened. She voiced a curious cry. It was deep-toned, pealing with a wonderful timbre. A happy burst of sound like a baby makes, but strong, ringing, musically golden, and pathetically eager, pitifully glad, so that it brought tears to my eyes, cynical old man that I am. I saw Ray wipe his eyes. "Can you talk?" Ray put the question in a clear, deliberate voice, with great kindness ringing in it. "Talk?" The chiming golden voice was slow, uncertain. "Talk? Yes, I talked with Mother, but for long I have had no need to talk." "Where is your mother?" Ray's voice was gentle. "She is gone. She was here when I was little." The clear, silvery voice was more certain now. "Once, when I was almost as big as she was still. She was cold. She did not move when I called her. The things took her away. She was dead. She told me that sometime she would be dead." Bright tears came in the wide blue eyes, trickled down over the perfect face. A pathetic catch was in the deliberate, halting voice. I turned away, and Ray put a handkerchief to his face. "What is your name? Who are you?" Ray spoke kindly. "I am Mildred Meriden." "Meriden! Ray turned to me. "I bet this is a daughter of the Major and his wife." "Father was the Major," the girl said slowly. "He and Mother came in a machine that flew from a far land. The things burned the machine with the red fire. They came here and the things kept them. They made Mother sing over the water. They killed Father. I never saw him." "I know," Ray said gently. "We came from the same land. We saw your father's machine above." "You came from outside. And you are going back? Oh, take me with you. Take me." Piteous pleading was in her voice. "It is so lonely since the things took Mother away. Mother told me that sometime men would come and take me away to see the people and the outside that she told me of. Oh, please take me." "Don't worry. You go along whenever we leave, if we can get out." "Oh, I am so glad. You are very good." Impulsively, she threw her arms around Ray's neck. Gently, he disengaged himself, flushing a little. I noticed, however, that he did not seem particularly displeased. "But can we get out?" "Mother and I tried. We could never get out. The things watch. They make me come to the water to sing when the great bell rings." "Are these things good to eat?" I motioned to the brilliant fungal forest. I had begun to fear that Ray would never get to this very important topic. Blue eyes regarded me. "Eat? Oh, you are hungry. Come, I have food." Like a child, she grasped Ray's hand, pulled him toward the mushroom jungle. I followed, and we slipped in between the brilliantly golden fleshy stalks. They rose to the tangle of bright feathery fringes above, huge and substantial as the trunks of trees. In a few minutes we came to a wide, shallow canal, metal-walled, through which a slow current of the opalescent, luminous liquid was flowing. We crossed this on a narrow metal footbridge and went on through the brilliant forest. Suddenly we emerged into a little clearing, with the black waters of the Great Lake visible beyond it, across a quarter-mile of rocky beach. In the middle of the open space rose 3 straight cylinders of azure crystal, side by side. Each must have been 20 feet in diameter and 40 feet high. They shone with a clear blue light, like the cylindrical buildings we had seen in the strange city of the crab creatures below the Great Lake. Mildred Meriden, the strangely beautiful girl who had known no other world than this amazing cavern empire where giant crabs reigned, beckoned us with unconscious, queenly grace to enter the arched door in the blue sapphire wall of her remarkable abode of clustered cylinders. The crystal of the wall seemed luminous. The lofty cylinders were filled with a liquid azure radiance. The high, round room we entered was strangely furnished. There was a silken couch, a bathing pool of blue crystal filled with sparkling water, a curious chest of drawers made of bright aluminum with a mirror of polished crystal, its top bearing odd combs and other articles. The furnishings must have been done by the giant crabs under human direction. Mildred led us quickly across the room, through an arched opening into another. A round aluminum table stood in the center of the room, with 2 curious metal chairs beside it. Odd metal cabinets stood about the shining blue walls. The girl made us sit down and put dishes before us. She gave us each a bowl of thick, sweetish soup, darkly red, placed before us a dish piled high with little circular cakes, crisp and brown, which had a tantalizing fragrance, poured for each of us a transparent crystal goblet full of clear amber drink. We fell to with enthusiasm and abandoned. "The things made this place for Father," the girl told us, as she watched us eat, attentively replenishing the red soup in the great blue crystal bowl, or the little cakes, or the fragrant amber drink. "They would give him anything he wanted, but he tried to go away with Mother, and they killed him." "We must get out of here," Ray declared when at last we had done. "We must get together a lot of food and enough clothing for all of us. We ought to be able to make it to the edge of the ice pack. We've got to give those crab things the slip. We ought to get off before they know we're here, unless they already do." Mildred was eagerly attentive. She was so unused to human speech that it took the best of her efforts to understand us, though it seems that her mother had given her quite a wide education. She promised that there would be no difficulty about the food. "Mother taught me how to fix food," she said. "She always said that sometime men would come with weapons of fire and great noise that would tear and kill the things. I have food ready in bags, more than we can carry. I have, too, the furs that Mother and Father wore." She ran into another room and returned with a great pile of fur garments, which we examined and found to be in good condition. "Now is the time," Ray said. "I'd like to know more about the big crabs, but there'll be a chance for that later. Mildred is the important thing now. We must get her out. Then we can tell the world about this place and come back with a bigger expedition." "You think we can reach the coast?" "I think so. It might be hard on Mildred, but we will have food. We can probably find fuel for the stove in Merriden's plane, if the tanks were well sealed. And Captain Harper should have a relief party landed and sent to meet us. We should have only 300 or 400 miles to go alone." 300 or 400 miles over country like we've been crossing in the last week, with a girl. Ray, we'll never make it. "It's the only chance." I said nothing more. I knew that I could stand no such march on my frozen feet, but I resolved to say nothing about it. I would help them as far as I could, and then walk out of camp some night. Men have done just that. Mildred brought out sacks of the little cakes, and of a red powder that seemed to be the dried and ground flesh of a crimson mushroom. We made a pack for each of us, as heavy as we could carry. Just before we were ready to start, Ray took off my footgear and treated my feet from his medicine kit. I had feared gangrene, but he assured me there was no danger if they were well cared for. Walking was still exquisitely painful to me as we slipped out through the arched door and into the fungoid forest beyond the 3 blue cylinders. As rapidly and silently as possible, we hastened through the brilliant fungus forest, across the river of opalescent liquid, to the foot of the fall of fire. A weird and splendid sight was that sheer arc of shimmering white flame, roaring into a pool of opal light and surrounded with a mist of moon flame. We reached the foot of the metal ladder spiked to the rocks beside the fall and started up immediately. The going was not easy. The packs of food, heavy enough when we were on the level ground, were difficult indeed to lift when one was scrambling up over rungs 4 feet apart. Ray climbed ahead with a piece of rope fastened from his waist to Mildred's, so that he could help her if she slipped. I was below the girl. We were halfway up the rock when suddenly a glare of red light shone upon me, casting my shadow sharply on the cliff. I looked up and saw the broad, intensely red beam of a heat ray like that we had seen the giant crab use. The ray came, evidently, from the shore of the great lake with its submerged city of blue cylinders. It fell upon the face of the cliff just above us. Quickly the latter was heated to cherry red. The face of the rock grew incandescent, cracked. Hot sparks rained down upon us. Slowly the ray moved on toward us.
"Guess we'd better call it off," said Ray. "They have the advantage right now. Better get to climbing down, Jim. This ladder's going to be burning my hands pretty soon."
I climbed down. Mildred and Ray scrambled down behind me. The ray followed us, keeping the metal of a cherry red just above Ray's hands. I looked down and saw a dozen of the giant crabs lumbering up out of the fungoid jungle from the direction of the great lake. Hideous things they were, with staring, stalked eyes, shining green antennae, polished red shells, claw-armed limbs. Like the one that had passed us in the upper cavern, they wore glistening white metal accoutrements. We clambered down with the red ray following. I dropped to the ground among them, wet with the sweat of horror. I reeled in nausea from the intolerable odor of the crab things. It was indescribable, overpowering. Curious, rasping stridulations came from them, sounds which seemed to serve as a means of communication, and which Mildred evidently understood. "They say you will not be harmed, but that you must not go out," she called down. I was seized by the pincher-like claws, held writhing in an unbreakable grasp, while the glittering eyes twisted about, looked at me, and the shining green tentacles wavered questioningly over me. My stomach revolted at the horrible odor. The crabs tore off my pack, even my clothing. Ray was similarly treated as soon as he reached the ground. Though they took Mildred's pack, they treated her with a curious respect. In a few minutes they released us. They had taken the packs, the rifle and ammunition, our medicine kit, and the few instruments we had brought with us down the shaft. Even our clothing. They turned us loose, stark naked. Ray's face and neck went beet red when he saw Mildred standing by him. The rasping sound came from one of them again. "It says you may stay with me," Mildred said. "They will not harm you unless you try to get away. If you do, you die, as Father did. They will keep what they took from you." Several of the creatures went scraping off, carrying the articles they had taken from us, either in their claws or in the metal cases they wore. Several waited, staring at us with the stalked compound eyes, and waving the green antennae as if they were organs of some special sense. Two of the creatures waited at the foot of the metal ladder, holding the long, slender white tubes of the heat ray in their claws. "They say we can go now," Mildred said. She led the way toward the edge of the brilliant jungle. She seemed to be without false modesty, for I saw her glancing with evident admiration at Ray's lithe and powerful white-skinned figure. We followed her into the giant mushrooms, glad to escape the overpowering stench of the crabs. In a few minutes we arrived again at the strange building of the 3 blue cylinders. Mildred, noticing our discomfort, produced for each of us a piece of white silken fabric with which we draped ourselves. She had noticed my difficulty in walking on bare feet. She had me bathe them, then dressed them with a soothing yellow oil, and bandaged them skillfully. "Anyhow," she said later, "it is good to have both of you here with me. I am sorry indeed for you that you may never see your country again, but it is good fortune for me. I was so lonely." "These damn crabs don't know me," Ray Summers muttered. "They think I'll play around like a pet kitten for the rest of my life. They'll get their eyes open. We'll spend the winter on Palm Beach yet." "It seems to me that we're rather outnumbered," I said. and it's rather more pleasant in here than outside."
"I'm going to get that rifle," Ray declared, "and give these big crabs a little respect for humanity."
"Let's rest up a while first, anyhow," I urged. Presently, Mildred noticed how tired we were. She went into the third of the connected cylinders of blue crystal, was busy a few minutes, and called us to the couches she had prepared there. "You may sleep," she told us. "The things never come here, and they said they would not harm you if you did not try to go out." We lay down on the silken beds. In a few minutes I was asleep. I awoke to feel a curious unease, a sense of impending catastrophe. Ray was bending over me, his face drawn with anxiety.
"Something's happened," he whispered. "She's gone."
I sat up, staring into the liquid blue vastness of the tall cylinder above us. "Listen, what's that?" A deep bell note sounded out, brazen, clanging, sonorous, throbbing, mighty. It rang through the cylindered rooms. Slowly it died, faded to silence with a last ringing pulse. Tense minutes of silence passed. Again it boomed out, throbbed and died. After more long minutes, there was yet a third.
"Outside somewhere."
Ray started, ran to the arched door. We looked out upon the dense forest of gold and crimson mushrooms that grew below the black cavern roof. Before us, across a few hundred yards of bare, rocky beach, was the edge of a crystal lake with the city of blue cylinders upon its floor.
"God, what's that?"
Ray gripped my arm crushingly. A thin, wailing scream came across the beach from the black lake. A piteous sound it was, plaintive, pleading. Higher and higher it rose, until it was a piercing silver note. Clear and sweet it was, but inexpressibly lonely, sorrowful, mournful. It sank slowly, died away. Again it rose and fell, and again. "It's Mildred," I gasped. "Didn't she say something about singing to the crabs?"
"Yes, I think she did." "Well, if that's singing, it's wonderful. Had me feeling like I'd never see another human. But listen."
End of part 2.